Every year we have so many people that just drive by here on Center Street and they are amazed at how beautiful our planters look. The flowers are just in full bloom. The sweet potato vines are just crawling out of the flower beds, and they ask us, how do you get those plants to look so great? There's some really critical steps to be successful, whether you're planting in planters or whether you're doing large planting areas, flower beds. Got to start with the best soil. So we start with some of the best soils that you can get between the Fertilome Ultimate Potting Mix and from Fox Farm, our salamander soil. We mix those two together for our planters. The reason being, this one is the Fertilome Ultimate Potting Mix has high peat moss. It's got some perlite, it's got some vermiculite in there, but the salamander soil has coconut coir in there. So it's a moisture holding blend. So it really helps aerate the soil and hold a lot more moisture. So we mix those two together, and then we get this beautiful dark rich soil that just will hold moisture and hold nutrient for the plants throughout the really hot dry summers that we have here in Cache Valley. So as we're digging our holes to get ready to plant our plants, one of the things that we put in there first is some Nutrigel. The Nutrigel is a polymer crystal, and the polymer crystal will hold moisture up to 100 times its weight in water. But it also has fertilizer in there. So the crystals have absorbed up the fertilizer. We're gonna put these down in the bottom for a 1 gallon plant that I'm gonna be planting here. We're gonna do about a tablespoon in the bottom of the hole. So we're gonna take that granule, we're gonna sprinkle that right down into the bottom of the hole. About a tablespoon for a large plant. For a 4-inch flower, we would use about a teaspoon, maybe a teaspoon and a half, kind of work it down into the bottom. And then as you're planting, make sure not to overplant your planters. One big problem that a lot of gardeners have is they overplant because they want their planters to look beautiful right when they plant them. And that's great, but as the plants get bigger, they'll just overcrowd each other. So our planters tend to look a lot more spaced apart and sometimes even a little sparse when we first plant, because we want those plants to have plenty of room and plenty of space to spread out and to grow and to fill those planters up. So it works much better to plant sparse to begin with and then let those plants really fill in. And it doesn't take very long. It takes just a couple of weeks and all of a sudden your plants are flowing all over the place. Once we get our plants planted, we put a slow release, long lasting fertilizer in there like our Garden Coat. So the Garden Coat has a full complement of nutrient in there. It's got the nitrogen, the phosphorus, the potassium, all the micronutrients for the plants. Every time you water the planters, it will release a little bit of fertilizer out into the planter so the plants can pick that up. It lasts for 4 months. So it's a long-lasting, slow-release type fertilizer. Really keeps the plants looking great. And so we'll put a little bit of that. We'll put a little bit of that in with our plant. And usually for a planter this size, we're gonna use about 3 tablespoons, and 3 tablespoons spread all over the planter is going to give that plant the nutrient that it needs for the entire summer. But once we get those planted and get those going, we want to water those in to really get them established with a root drench like our Kinga Roots. So this is from Bush Doctor. Kinga Roots is all natural, it's all organic. It has tons of microbes and microorganisms in there to really encourage root development. It's got mycorrhiza to make the roots of your plants just take off like crazy. The key to really keeping your plants looking good is to focus on getting the roots as healthy as possible, because once those roots are really healthy and taken off, they can pick up water better, they can pick up nutrient better, and the root system reflects on top of the plant. So if we have a really healthy big root system, you're gonna have a really big healthy plant as well too that can pick up the nutrient, pick up the water that it needs. So we'll mix up the Kinga Roots into our water, like the initial watering. And then when you water those plants, make sure and saturate the soil really well. So we'll water and get that soil saturated, and we'll go back just an hour later, let it just kind of saturate into the soil, and then we'll water them again to get them really soaked up and allow them to pick up that Kinga Roots. So once they get planted, we've got drip systems into our planters, keeps them happy all summer long. We've got them going even in the middle, really hot part of the summer, about just once a day, just to keep the soil nice and moist. But twice a week, we go in there and we fertilize with a water-soluble fertilizer. So we're supplementing the fertilizer that we've already put into the planters, because these plants feed a lot. And it's surprising how much they'll actually consume when you're fertilizing them consistently. So we will use our all-purpose fertilizer from High Yield. It's a 20-20-20. That high nitrogen will allow the plants to crawl. So you'll get these big long vines from the sweet potatoes because we're feeding them with a lot of nitrogen, and they'll crawl 6, 8, sometimes even 10 feet across because of that higher nitrogen fertilizer in there. But we also use the blooming and rooting, and we alternate these. So we fertilize on Tuesdays and on Fridays. So higher nitrogen on Tuesdays, higher phosphorus with the blooming and rooting on Fridays to keep them blooming. And they'll set flowers and set flowers and set flowers all summer long. So really the critical components to being successful with planters and with flower beds is to start with the best soil you possibly can. You know, a soil that's got some coconut coir, it's got some peat moss, it's got vermiculite, it's got perlite in there, no bark. We don't want any bark in our potting mix. We want just the best soil that you can possibly get. When you're planting, make sure and use a water holding material like the Nutrigel so that when you're watering, that water is absorbed and held right there next to the root system. Make sure and fertilize. You've got to fertilize, 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 because these flowers that just bloom and bloom and bloom, they feed on a daily basis. And if they're not able to feed every day, just like you and I, they just don't perform the way they're supposed to. So we got to feed, feed, feed. But if you do that, you can have amazing flower beds and amazing planters that you can enjoy all summer long.